Hello, everyone. This is Sam, and I wanted to talk to you about my plans for 2026. Uh, in my introduction video, I kind of mentioned I was going to do a video like this talking about what I wanted to do for this upcoming year. Uh, and originally, I was going to post it just a few days after I posted that initial video. Uh, Unfortunately, I got sick a few days before Christmas, and I wasn't really able to talk much for several days. Even now, I'm still kind of getting my voice back. And the pop you might have just heard was fireworks because it is now New Year's Eve. About a week later that I wanted this up than I had originally planned. But it's New Year's Eve, which means I've got about 2 hours and 45 minutes to get this up before the plans for 2026 becomes redundant because every single video made will have been made in 2026. So I'm going to get through this as quick as I can so I can get this up on YouTube and get it done before anything else. I also really like sort of verbalizing my plans so that I know the direction I want to go to during this whole BookTube experience. I don't know if that's a normal thing on BookTube or not, but it's something I want to do to partially to let you guys know what I'm going to do, but partially to give myself a clear idea of what I want to do this coming year. So first I want to talk about some events that are going to be going on. One of them is one that is being done by other booktubers that I know about. Two others are ones that I'm going to do. One is a private thing. I don't think anybody else should follow me with it. And the second one is going to be a event that I think people should follow me with. I don't know exactly how the BookTube things work with when it comes to events, but I'll figure it out as I go along. So the event that I know other booktubers are doing is H. Rider Haggard January, which is an event throughout January focusing on the Victorian era English adventure writer H. Rider Haggard. Haggard is interesting to me because he was part of that wave of pre-pulp writers. Like he was writing about a decade or so before pulp really came into being. So I'm really interested in reading Haggard's adventure stories to really see where a lot of the pulp writers got a lot of their inspiration from, because apparently Haggard was very inspirational to several pulp writers. So I'm going to be doing that event. Another firework just went off. Like I said, it's New Year's Eve. But I'm going to do H. Rider Haggard January 2. I'll upload a video on that next day or two, say what I'm going to be reading. Excuse me. The two private events I'm doing, well, one of them's private. The private event is I'm going to do Occult Detective October. Some of you on BookTube might have remembered there was an Occult Detective October event back in, October. I saw it on Michael K. Vaughn's channel, and I really wanted to do that one. I had actually gotten all the books that I was going to use for that reading challenge, and for one reason or another, I just never got to it. And I was really frustrated because I'm actually planning on writing my own occult detective novel, and I was going to be reading all these things for inspiration for my own writing. So I'm going to do Occult Detective October, but I'm going to do it in January. So that's not really one that I want folks necessarily following me for. Although you can follow me if you want to do your own late occult detective October, but I'll be doing that in January. Now this other one, this last event that I want to do, uh, I've still got a working title for it. I'll iron it out over the next few days, but it's basically a Revolutionary War book challenge. And the challenge is going to be to read 13 books about the American Revolution, either fiction or nonfiction, by the end of 2026. And the reason is that 2026 is the 250th anniversary of America, my home nation. And I really wanted to do something to sort of promote reading regarding America's revolution and or war for independence for the 250th anniversary. So I'm going to be doing an event regarding that, and I'll elaborate on in the next few days, but that's one that I really hope other people will join in, because it's sort of my way of using BookTube to celebrate this important milestone in American history. So, wonderful. Uh, okay, so now I'm going to go through the overall goals for the year I have and some show ideas I have. And when I say show ideas, I basically mean more series ideas, like a series of reviews that I'll do focused on specific subjects. Sometimes it'll be classed around genre, sometimes it'll be classed around authors. But before I get into those shows, I first want to talk about some general goals that I have for the year. First one I've got written down is reading through all of my Pulp Fest books. I went to Pulp Fest 2025 this year, and I bought a lot of books. I bought around 50 pounds worth, I think it was the final tally. It was so much I had to send the books back to my home via FedEx, because it was just so many. There was no way I could take them back on the plane when I was flying back from Pulp Fest. And it's a little hard to see the way the camera's set up, but this pile my hands on, some of these are the Pulp Fest books, and below it is a box, a real long box, and all of the Pulp Fest books are in that. So reading all of those books are going to be one of my main goals for this year. I'm also going to work through the Amazon and Hamilton book purchases that I've bought over the last 3 years. If you watched my intro video, you know that I bought a lot of Hamilton or not Hamilton, not Alexander Hamilton, though with that Revolutionary War book challenge, we may do something with him. But both Amazon and Hamilton Books, which is a discount book retailer, I bought a lot of stuff from them during this kind of weird period in my life. You can watch the introduction video for that. And I'm going to be doing my best to work through them, because there's a lot of books in there that, because of my state of mind at the time, some of them I don't even remember buying. I'm like, oh, yeah, I bought those. And so I'm kind of trying to sort them and read them month by month and see if I can work my way through them. So I'll be working through my Amazon Hamilton book purchases. Another general goal I have is biblical reading. One of the things I want to do is read through the entire Holy Bible in 1 year. I have a few reasons for doing this. The first is that I recently turned 30, and when you kind of change the decade of your life, you kind of start thinking, well, what do I think about things in life? And, religion is sort of one of those things. And I was raised in a Methodist church that I still attend, though not as frequently as I used to. And I guess I really want to do a full read through of the Bible to just sort of read it and see what I think about the elements of the Christian faith and really examine that element of my life, because I think I do need to really immerse myself in it if I want to really understand that element of my personality, because when you're raised in a church, it's always a part of you, even if you don't want it to be. I'm fine with it, but I still want to read because I've kind of changed over the last 10 years, and I really want to sort of examine Christianity a little more thoroughly. I also want to do it because my dad did a whole read through of the Bible after my mother and his wife passed away. And he had a very interesting perspective on the Bible after he'd done that full read through. So he's the one that's kind of inspired me to look through it and try to work myself through the Bible. So I will be looking at the books of the Old and New Testament kind of in both a religious context and basically a writing context, because I know a lot more about writing nowadays than I did way back when. I'm going to be using my old youth group Bible that I had from my teenage years. It's buried around here somewhere, and once I dig it up, I'm going to use that. It's not the new international version. It was a different version of the Bible, but I remember it being a good version to read, so I'll be reading that. Sort of parallel to religion, I'm also going to be doing a little bit of philosophy research, specifically on the philosophy of Stoicism. If you've been on the internet the last 5-6 years, you know there's been kind of a Stoicism revival of some kind. Like, there's just been a lot of folks who have really taken to Stoicism, and it's interesting. And excuse me. So I really wanted to examine Stoicism and see if the philosophy really appeals to me. So I'll be doing some research about Stoicism, reading some books that people have recommended for understanding Stoic philosophy. I've got like Marcus Aurelius's Meditations. So I'm just kind of interested in philosophy because a lot of people have talked about it as being sort of a more reserved philosophy and not as I don't want to say obvious, but it's not as bombastic as other philosophies. It's more reserved, and as someone who's a more reserved person, I'm kind of down with any philosophy that matches that aspect of my personality. Sort of like the Bible, I got this book called The Daily Stoic. And it's got daily meditations related to Stoicism, a bunch of quotes from Stoic thinkers. So I'm going to be reading that throughout the year just to see how this sort of philosophy appeals to me. So that'll be interesting. The last sort of general goal that I'm going to be doing, I'm going to be doing an occasional show called Publisher Callout. Those of you who have grown up on the internet probably know about Content Cop. That was the what was his name? iDubbbz, his little thing calling out internet creators for bad behavior and dishonest practices. And I wanted to make one that was kind of a BookTube version and was aimed more at like crowdfunders and publishers who do like shady business practices or just have weird sort of shady backgrounds. I actually have two in mind right now. One I know I'm going to do because the guy who's run this one crowdfund, he's not fully on the up and up. I already know. A second one I'm sort of waiting because I sent the publisher an email asking them about stuff that I had concerns with. And I want to hold off on doing anything regarding them just because I really don't want to cause a fire if it's just a misunderstanding or if there's a deeper reason for what they've done. So you should always work to resolve issues with parties that you have problems with before you make call-out videos. Because when you don't, things go very wrong, generally. So that's one that I'm probably not going to do very often. Like I said, I only have two in mind right now, so that's not going to become my main brand. So okay. Oh, just a second. So now I'm going to talk about review series where I'm going to focus on specific authors. And there are going to be shows dedicated to these authors and examining their works and trying to sort of build a body of their work. And the first one, and I've given them sort of unique names for the shows. And these are all very greatly inspired by Michael K. Vaughan's show, The Robert E. Howard Show. I'm taking a little bit of a inspiration from that, though I'm trying to do a thing where for a lot of them, I work through their books as they're writing. I won't do that with all of them, but some of them I am going to do that. So the very first author-specific show is regarding Edgar Rice Burroughs, and I'm going to call it Buried in Burroughs. The title of that comes from the fact that I have a lot of Edgar Rice Burroughs books, and there's a story behind that I'll tell you in a minute. But this show will focus on Edgar Rice Burroughs because Burroughs is actually a hugely influential writer. A lot of people kind of just go, oh, well, he was a pulp writer. There wasn't much else to him. But he wasn't just a pulp writer. He was a multimedia giant. Because, the Tarzan movies that were made from his character were huge. And even if you've never read an Edgar Rice Burroughs story, you've read something that was inspired by Edgar Rice Burroughs. His mark is hugely influential, and he did so much in the realm of pulp science fiction and fantasy that his influence is just really hard to measure because it's just too big. So I became interested in Burroughs first on Facebook because there was a Facebook group called For the Love of ERB. And I joined them because I kind of found some of their posts interesting, and I was like clicking through some of the things they were sharing. And then when I was at Pulpfest 2025, I came across the Burroughs Bibliophiles, and I read some of their stuff, and I was like, "Oh, this is pretty cool." And I actually joined the Burroughs Bibliophiles while I was there at Pulpfest. So, so I was kind of gaining an interest in Edgar Rice Burroughs, but it was kind of just a passing interest. I'm like, I'm not sure I'm gonna do much else. And then when I came home, it was I would say about a month after I came home from Pulp Fest, the local used bookstore that I go to brought in some older science fiction fan had brought in all of his books to donate, and there was an entire box of Edgar Rice Burroughs material. And it was like near complete editions of Tarzan, uh, John Carter of Mars, Pellucidar, uh, and it was just all these Edgar Rice Burroughs series. In fact, I have the two I'll show here: the Princess of Mars, uh, with the paperback cover. I think it's by Michael Whalen, and the original Tarzan of the Apes in paperback. I think this is a Neil Adams cover. Yeah, cover art by Neil Adams. So I got all these paperbacks for like $2 or $3 each, uh, and it was just an insanely good deal. And they're in decent condition. They're a little worn, but they're good condition. I was like, oh man, I have to read them now. I have to get them. This is a sign from the universe that I should be reading Edgar Rice Burroughs with all this stuff that's coming. So I'm going to be reading a lot of Burroughs in the coming year and talking about my thoughts and feelings on him. Especially because just on my cursory research, he's insanely influential. So we're going to be doing a lot with him. The second author show is going to be about Robert E. Howard. I have to apologize to Michael K. Vaughan. I know he has the Robert E. Howard show, but I want to do my own version and do a show talking about Howard, and I'm going to call mine "Hounded by Howard," since I'm buried by Burroughs. Since I'm buried in Burroughs due to all the Burroughs books, I'm going to be hounded by Howard. And this will be a series focusing on Robert E. Howard's books. I'm actually familiar with Howard before Burroughs because I've actually read a fair number of his characters like Solomon Kane and Conan. So I'm going to be doing some Howard stories here in the coming year. Solomon Kane is probably going to be first just because that's the Howard character I'm most familiar with. And then it will probably be followed by Cull, because I've been reading Cull to sort of catch myself up on Conan, because Cull was kind of the predecessor to Conan. And after I'm done with Cull, I'm going to be reading Bran Mac Morn, because one of the Cull stories involves Bran Mac Morn summoning Cull's spirit to fight against the Romans, because Bran Mac Morn is a Pictish king in ancient England during the time of the Roman occupation. So there's going to be a lot of fun stuff with that. All right, so the third author-centered story or series that I'll be focusing on is going to be called Leavened by Lewis, and that is C.S. Lewis, the Christian writer. I'm calling it Leavened by Lewis because I didn't want a violent verb for C.S. Lewis, because I got buried in burrows, hounded by Howard. Those verbs are fitting for them because they had very violent, punchy stories. But Lewis was a lot more interested in philosophical ideas, particularly regarding Christianity. So I wanted to give him a softer name. So he's going to be Leavened by Lewis, because leavened is what's involved in bread making, bread being one of the pieces of the Christian sacrament. So I was like, all right, Leavened by Lewis. It has a bread connotation, a communion connotation. It felt more fitting for him. And this year I will be focusing on C.S. Lewis's Space Trilogy and Chronicles of Narnia. I don't have the Space Trilogy right now, but I do have the entire Chronicles of Narnia. It came a few days ago. And I wanted to read both the Space Trilogy and the Chronicles of Narnia for a few different reasons. The Space Trilogy, for those that don't know, before C.S. Lewis did the Chronicles of Narnia, he actually did a science fiction trilogy called the Space Trilogy. And it's one of those stories that is not as well known as Narnia, but has a fair amount of cult following. It's also one of those stories that, ironically, you probably could draw a line from Lewis to Burroughs, because, you know, Burroughs did John Carter of Mars, and I've been told the Space Trilogy involves visiting nearby planets. The main character visits nearby planets in sort of a John Carter way. So I'm like, okay, that kind of caught my attention. Another reason is one of the Space Trilogy books is actually going to be nominated for a Prometheus Award by the Libertarian Futurist Society, which I'm a member of. And so I wanted to read That Hideous Strength so I could vote on it for the society. So that's one reason I wanted to read those. And I wanted to read Narnia here because I saw some rumors a few weeks ago that there was going to be a new Narnia either movie or series done by that, she's a famous director, I think it's Greta Gerwig. Supposedly she's going to be doing an adaptation of Narnia in the coming future. So I really wanted to reread these to familiarize myself with his work. Partially also because the only one I ever read was The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. And I think it was around 2005 when that Disney version of Lion, Witch, and Wardrobe came out. So I really want to check this out. The other thing is that the Narnia and the Space Trilogy will be my main focus this year, but I might move on to other fiction, because he had other fiction he did. And if I find any stories I'm interested in, I'll be sure to check them out. Let's see. Oh, this is a big one. So big I need another sip. But This is the one I'm really excited for. Uh, I'm going to do a series called The Shadow of Poe. And The Shadow of Poe is going to be focused on Edgar Allan Poe. Because Edgar Allan Poe is actually a hugely influential author who a lot of people don't really understand how deep his influence is. Because most people, when you think of Poe, they think of all his horror stories, because that was what he was most famous for. The Pit and the Pendulum, The Black Cat, The Cask of Amontillado. When you hear Poe, you think of horror. And there's a good reason for that, because he was hugely influential on horror. Virtually every American horror writer, or even non American horror writer, took inspiration from him in regards to his horror. But Poe actually was hugely influential in a lot of other genres that many people don't really know about. And the ones that I know off the top of my head are detective fiction, science fiction, and satire. And that's just the ones I know off the top of my head. And he's so insanely influential, but you don't hear anybody really talk much about him aside from his horror stories. And I really wanted to talk about Poe as a multi-genre author, not just a horror author. So I actually have this book. I bought it like 15 years ago, I think. Maybe maybe more like 10. But it's the Edgar Allan Poe Complete Tales and Poems. I know it's the complete tales. I'm not sure it's the complete poems, because I've found poems online that I don't think are in here. So it might not be the complete poems, but it is the complete tales, because every tale he's written I have found in here. And it's nice and thick, so uh, it definitely seems like it would have all his tales. So yeah, I'm gonna really dig into Poe this year, because his influence is really underestimated, and I really want people to understand how important he is as a writer, not just to America, but to the world, and not just to horror writers, but to writers in general. Like, he covered a lot of ground in his career, and he was a fabulous multi-genre author. I actually saw a tweet the other day that said something like, Edgar Allan Poe is to America what Shakespeare was to England. And my first knee-jerk impression was like, oh, that's a bit overstating it. But the more I've looked into his life and works, it's honestly not that much of an overstatement. And it's like, yeah, that is pretty close to what his influence could be compared to. So keep an eye out for that. That'll be one thing I'll be doing. Another couple of authors I'll focus on. I'm going to do a show called The Pulp Farmer. And it's not about a farmer that works in the soil. It is about Philip Jose Farmer. This was another guy I learned about at Pulp Fest this year. Farmer was interesting in the sense that he was kind of a late stage era pulp writer who started his career in like the late, in like the, I believe it was the mid 40s. And he was in the pulps just as they were sort of dying off. And then he graduated to the paperbacks. And he was so influenced by pulp and such a big fan of pulp that a lot of his work sort of revolved around pulp fiction characters or ones that were influenced by them. And he was kind of an early example of a fan who sort of grows out his writing style from things of old and sort of writing new things with old characters. Uh, and this is the other thing. He's probably more famous or infamous for being one of the first sex sci-fi authors. He was he excuse me. He was pretty well known for having a fair amount of sexuality and violence in his works that is off-putting to a lot of people, but as I've never read it, I have no clue if I'm off-put by it. So I wanted to look into his works and see how I felt about him. And this show will allow me to do that. In this book I have, The Maker of Universes. This was actually one I found with the Edgar Rice Burroughs thing. The guy who dropped off the Edgar Rice Burroughs books also dropped off like a box of Farmer books. So I have this. I think I have a couple of the other books he did. So another reason to do the show, because I have a fair number of the Farmer books. The next author focus will be Ray Bradbury, and I'm going to call his show The Ray Bradbury Chronicles. That's a play on his book The Martian Chronicles, which I have right here. And The Martian, Ray Bradbury, this was another author. I knew about Ray Bradbury before I went to Pulp Fest, but they had a panel this past year where they had a guy who, I forgot his name, but he was friends with Ray Bradbury. And he had this whole thing talking about how much Ray Bradbury was influenced by Edgar Rice Burroughs. So that I was like, oh, that's kind of interesting. And then that same batch that I bought the Burroughs and Farmer books in, there were a lot of Ray Bradbury books in there too. Not this one. This one I bought at my, not at the used bookstore, but at a Books A Million. But there were a lot of Bradbury books. And I actually knew about Bradbury because my father and my uncle had read a fair amount of his stories, and they always sort of talked positively about him. And I also knew about him because he was friends with Ray Harryhausen, who was the famous stop motion animator. And I knew about him because in a lot of Ray Harryhausen documentaries, Ray Bradbury is being interviewed, and I'm like, oh, okay, so I knew him from that. So and there's going to be two more. Okay, the last two author focus shows are going to be regarding Raphael Sabatini and Edgar Wallace. Both of these authors were discussed at Pulp Fest, and I found them really interesting. Starting with Sabatini, I'm going to do a show called Swashbuckling with Sabatini, because Sabatini did a lot of swashbuckling stories. I read a little bit of his story called The Seahawk, which they actually showed the movie adaptation of at Pulp Fest, so that was kind of interesting. And the Edgar Wallace show I'm going to be calling Words from Wallace. And that title's a bit of a joke because Edgar Wallace was a hugely fast writer. He had an insanely huge output. And a lot of it was helped because he didn't type out the words himself. He would dictate them to a secretary who wrote them down. So Words from Wallace is kind of a little bit of a joke about, oh yeah, it's Words from Wallace, because he would actually say his stories aloud to his secretary, which was a pretty common thing. Some writers might go, "Oh, well, that's cheating." It's like, well, it wasn't that unusual, and I think if we really looked into a lot of authors today, it might still be going on. But but it's still coming from the author, so I don't really have a problem with it. I'll be looking at some of his most popular stories, like The Four Just Men, The Green Archer, because I've heard some people say that that might have inspired the DC superhero Green Arrow. Uh, I don't know if that's true, but I've heard rumbles that it did. Uh, I'm also going to be looking at King Kong because Edgar Wallace did the screenplay. Uh, or I don't know if he did the screenplay or if he did the concept for King Kong with Marion C. Cooper. I have the novelization of King Kong here. This was actually put out about a year or so ago by, I believe his name is Micah Swanson Harris. He was the one that really helped put this together. But the novel itself is not by Edgar Wallace, even though he was a famous novel writer. It's actually by this guy, Delos W. Lovelace. So I'll cover this book. This will probably be covered on the show, but it won't be technically done by Wallace. But Wallace was involved in the creation of King Kong, so it's at least somewhat fitting. All right, one quick drink. So that's going to be all the author-specific shows. And now I want to talk about the genre-specific shows. And the genre-specific shows are the ones that I'm going to do that are focused on specific genres. It might be more accurate to call them mediums because some of these are not really genres. They're more mediums or categorization, but I wanted to do some of these just because they were specific things I was interested in. So the first genre show I want to do is called Crowdfund Collector. I'm really into crowdfunding. I got into it in college because I was getting really interested in independent publishing, and crowdfunding seemed like the easiest way to get your material out there. It's not as easy as I originally thought because there's been a lot of problems with crowdfunding over the last few years, but I still do it, and I really wanted to do a show focused on crowdfunding because I really think a lot of crowdfunders need reviews of their products. Because if you ask any author today whether they're crowdfunded or not, the biggest thing they always ask for is reviews. Because a lot of times people will buy their stuff, but they never tell them how they felt about it. They never say, "Oh yeah, this was good" or "this was bad." You just never hear from them. So I really wanted to provide a service to crowdfund publishers by reviewing their material and telling people whether they're worth the purchase or not. A recent example, this one came in the mail today. Not today, a few days ago. You're the Hunter from the Future from Antarctic Press. Antarctic Press is pretty well known. Some of you might have heard of the 1980s fantasy film Your Hunter from the Future. Well, this is a reprint of the original comic that movie was based off of. So I'm going to talk about this in a while, but yeah, I'm going to really try to do a lot of talk about crowdfunding. The next show I will do is I'm going to call it Comic Crazed. And that's going to be a show where I talk about old and new comic books, like this one. And it's going to vary between large and independent studios because I was a really big fan of comics as a kid. My favorite comic book characters were Spider-Man and the Hulk. And I kind of fell out of the comic books once I got into high school and college. But towards the end of college, I started getting back into them because I sort of started seeing them as sort of the middle ground between visual works like cinema and painting and literary works like, well, books. So I've gained a pretty big appreciation for them over the last couple of years. One source that'll be reviewed a lot is Land Comics, because Land Comics is a huge public domain comic book collector, and they've collected an insane amount of public domain comic books, and I actually have their most complete collection. The guy who runs it, Lance Jones, sent me a huge driver with all of the comics they have as of now. So Land will probably pop up a lot in this show. Let's see. Here, 1 second. All right, the next show is going to be focused on comic books' Eastern cousin, that is manga. I'm going to call it Manga Madness. This is one of the books I'll be doing. This is the first Goblin Slayer book. And manga is, of course, from Japan. Most of you don't need that explained, but I wanted to do a focus on manga because I kind of got into manga in high school with Death Note. Like, not an original choice, one of the most popular mangas and animes, but it was with Death Note that I got interested in manga. Then I kind of read them off and on in college for a while. But about a year or two ago, I started getting back into them because I was kind of curious about the flexibility of genres in manga, because a lot of the Western comic books are superhero focused, which are fun and good, but a lot of the manga stuff just seems to have a little more variety. So I really wanted to discuss the different genres of manga and say what I like and dislike about them. So that'll be a lot of fun. Now here's the 2W shows. I'm going to do 2 shows with 2 W's. One is called Werewolf Words. One's called Western Words. Werewolf Words are going to be what they sounds like. It's going to be books talking about werewolf literature. This is one I have right now called The Undying Monster, which is supposedly a werewolf tale by Jesse Douglas Carouche. And I wanted to talk about werewolf literature because I've always liked werewolves as a concept, and even as a kid, I kind of liked werewolves more than vampires, just because I kind of thought they had a more interesting setup. Like, just this idea that, a vampire's a monster all the time, but a werewolf could be sometimes a monster, sometimes not. And it was just kind of a more interesting, interesting setup. So I really want to talk about werewolves. If it's successful enough, I may dip into other were-creature type stories. Western Words, it's exactly what it sounds like. It's about westerns with cowboys and horses and six shooters. Uh, the one I got here is one of the most famous Western books of all time, Riders of the Purple Sage by Zane Grey, one of the most famous Western writers of all time. Uh, I really wanted to talk about him because Westerns are a very important part of American cultural heritage. Like, they are very much an American product, and they are very deeply important to our culture. Not just in literature, but in multiple media. You look a lot of stuff up. If there's any story or piece of media you like here in America, there's a good chance that it was in some way influenced by some degree by Westerns. So it is a deeply important thing for our culture. And I'm going to be examining pretty much all genres of Westerns, from pulp Westerns to classic Western novels to adult Westerns, which was kind of a trend. Adult Westerns, they're kind of what they sound like. They were a trend in the 70s and 80s where publishers started doing Western paperbacks that were exponentially more violent and sexual than the cleaner cut Westerns. So, and I'm also going to do modern Western stories done by recent authors, because I think modern authors do need to keep Westerns alive and kicking, because they're a very important part of our cultural heritage. The last two I want to talk regarding genre are politically based review shows. One I don't have a title for yet, and this was going to be basically my containment show, where I would discuss these politically charged books that are very controversial or hard to find because they're controversial. Because I really wanted to examine them from both a political and an artistic mindset, because I believe that works of art can be good even if they do not share my politics. So I wanted to go off on that and examine controversial books for those reasons. I will say I will start off with more milquetoast books, because I want, before I get into anything like really charged, because I want to see how people react first. Because if I start like a really milquetoast book and people freak out, then I'll be like, okay, maybe I shouldn't discuss these books if it causes too much of a problem on BookTube. But yeah, the second, I don't know what I'll call that one, but maybe too political or too hot to handle, something like that. But I'll figure out a name for that sometime. The second political one is Fires of Prometheus. You may have, I mentioned it earlier in this video that I was a member of the Libertarian Futurist Society, and one of the awards they have at the end of the year are the Prometheus Awards that honor science fiction or fantasy that is considered libertarian. I identify as a libertarian. I'm not sure if I'm still a libertarian, because the political winds have shifted so much in the last decade that maybe I'm not a libertarian anymore, but maybe I wouldn't be considered libertarian by other libertarians, but whatever. We're gonna figure out what it is. So, my show is going to be called Fires of Prometheus, and it's going to discuss science fiction and fantasy with libertarian themes. Because I want to see if these books are legitimately good libertarian products, or produce, or products isn't the right word. I want to see if these are true libertarian works of art, and I also just want to discuss them as stories, see if they work beyond the political posturing. One rule is that to be on that show, the books have to be considered libertarian by someone else other than me before I include them. Because I don't want to include any work that is just considered, that I consider libertarian out of the blue. And as I mentioned earlier, one reason I'm doing the C.S. Lewis one is one of the Space Trilogy books is That Hideous Strength, and that was nominated for a Prometheus Award, or that'll be on the ballot pretty soon. I don't know if it's been nominated or if it's on the ballot, but it will be that. Another one that's going to be on the ballot is this, Charles Stross's Singularity Sky. This is a more recent book. I think it was like 2002? 2003. So I've read this one already, but I kind of read it in a fugue state. I was kind of going through it real quick. So I'll be reading this sometime, because I have to read this again before July, because the Prometheus Awards are in July. So, yeah. Oh, one that I missed. Sorry, I missed this one. The last genre one. This one is technically not political, though it may overlap somewhat. It's what I'm going to call history hysteria. And history hysteria is I'm really interested in historical writing. And I'm going to have a show discussing history books. History books about anything. And I really want to examine their truthfulness, as well as their writing style, because, believe it or not, I think there is a right and a wrong way to write a history book. And I want to see if the authors are able to create not just a commendable representation of history, but if the history is actually well written. Because sometimes you can have a book with a fantastic amount of information, but it's not really written in an interesting way, and you just kind of, like, you use it as a source book. You don't really read it as a book. It has to be better than a mere listing of events. One I'll probably be doing this year is called A Disease in the Public Mind by Thomas Fleming, which is examines the reasons for the outbreak of the American Civil War. So that'll be interesting, and hopefully we can have a good discussion about history. All right, 1 second. All right, so that's it for the genre shows. Now we're going to move on to the pulp-related shows. As I mentioned before, I'm really into pulp fiction, not the movie, the genre. So I'm going to be doing a lot of reviews about pulp fiction, but these shows are going to be slightly different because they'll have a specific focus on specific pulp. One of the ones I really want to do, I'm going to call The Villains of Pulp. And the villains of pulp are it's going to examine the infamous villains of Pulp Fiction, whether it is villains from a hero pulp who were one of the enemies that the hero in the pulp fought, or if they are actually villain-centric pulps, where the villains are actually the main focus. This one, the mysterious Wu Fang, is actually one example. He was one of the few villains to actually get his own pulp, where it was him on the title, not the hero. So I'm going to do a lot of that. I will be one character I will talk about definitely on that show is Fu Manchu, because in case you couldn't tell by this cover, Wu Fang was an obvious Fu Manchu knockoff, and though it's interesting, Fu Manchu is going to be examined on villains of pulp, but he's technically not a pulp villain because he actually appeared in the Slick magazines, which were the upper end magazines of the time. So, but the problem is that Fu Manchu was copied so much by pulp authors that you kind of have to examine Fu Manchu to really like understand Wu Fang or Dr. Death. So, and plus over the years, a lot of people sort of conflated Fu Manchu with Pulp Fiction just because, well, his style just sort of feels like Pulp Fiction. So, and speaking of villains, I'm going to do another show I'm going to call The Shadow's Villains. As I said in my introduction video, I am a huge Shadow fan, and I really wanted to catalog his villains, particularly his the ones with unique monikers. I got one here that it's one of the Sanctum reprints of the Shadow. It has the Salamanders and the Black Falcon, and the Black Falcon will definitely be covered on the Shadow's villains. So I will be covering the Shadow's villains, whether they're one-offs or if they appeared multiple times. There weren't that many that appeared multiple times, but they did show up, like Shiwan Khan and Benedict Stark. So that's one thing I'll be covering for Shadow villains. I also want to start a full-fledged Shadow review show, and I want to call it Sanctum Reports, because the Shadow always got his reports in his sanctum. So Sanctum Reports will be discussing recently read Shadow books and my impressions of them. One I'm reading right now is called The Killer. It's packaged together with another story called The Museum Murders, which I'll read after that. But I actually got a lot of these Sanctum books right before Sanctum lost the Shadow license and couldn't reprint them anymore. So I got a lot of these, and I'll be reading these fairly soon. Just as a quick plug, I work for a group called the Shadowed Circle, which does nonfiction publication about the Shadow. And we actually host a book club focused around Shadow stories. And we're actually going to be talking about The Killer in January's book club at the end of the month. So I'll remind folks of that later in January. I also want to do a Doc Savage discussion show. I'm thinking of calling it Musings of Bronze. I don't know if that name has been used elsewhere, but I'll look around. But I got into Doc Savage a little while ago. I I discovered him a little after The Shadow, but I was kind of off and on about him until really this year. Because when I was at Pulp Fest 2025, I met Ron Hill, who is a well-known Doc Savage fan who did a documentary called We Are Doc Savage. And I talked with him at Pulp Fest, and he actually got me interested in Doc Savage. So I'm going to be reviewing some Doc Savage stories. Ironically, this one works as a would work for a villains of the Pulp episode, because these are the two stories that John Sunlight appeared, Fortress of Solitude and Devil Genghis. John Sunlight was apparently the only Doc Savage villain who appeared more than once, so he'll definitely be discussed in the Villains of Pulp series. On the last Pulp-related show I want to talk about is, I'm going to call it Ladies of the Pulps. And this series will examine both female pulp writers and female pulp characters, because it's actually really hard to find female pulp characters, and a lot of female pulp writers were not as well known as some of their male colleagues, so I really wanted to draw attention to their contributions to pulp. In regards to female pulp writers, one of the ones I'll definitely be covering is C.L. Moore, who was one of the mothers, I should say, mothers of Sword and Sorcery, with her character Drell of Jory, which was one of the, I don't think she was the first, but she was one of the first Sword and Sorcery heroines. So we get to talk about both C.L. Moore, the female pulp writer, and Drell of Jory, the female pulp character. My first episode will probably not be on an author, but a character. It will either be the Domino Lady or Pat Savage, because those are two characters I've really been looking into. Really looking into over the last few months. So keep an eye out for that. All right. We're in the home stretch, folks. Don't worry. The last bunch that I'm going to talk about is what I call the character-related shows. And these are going to be characters who I review based on the characters. This is very character-focused. And the first one I want to talk about is a show I'm going to call the Universal Monsters source books, because I've been really getting into the Universal Monsters, and one of the things I wanted to do is read the stories that the Universal Monster movies, or at least a lot of them, were adapted from. I especially wanted to read Dracula, which actually, you can't see it from the camera, but I have the book Dracula right here. And I really wanted to read Dracula because Dracula was one of the main inspirations for The Shadow. So I really wanted to learn about the books that the Universal Monsters came from. I also have The Invisible Man, which of course had the 1933 adaptation starring Claude Rains. I also have this one, it's called like League of Monsters. I think it's kind of meant to be a play on the Universal Monsters. So I'm going to be doing that because I'm really want to read the Universal Monsters and be ready for next October when I can watch them all. So, second character book second character show I really want to do is James Bond. Because James Bond I found a lot of James Bond books, like here, Casino Royale. I found a lot of them in that same batch I found Edgar Rice Burroughs and Philip Jose Farmer in. I really wanted these paperbacks. This is one of the original paperbacks. I really wanted them because I was buying the editions on Amazon for a while, the James Bond books from Amazon, but they edited a lot of the words and phrases, or even entire passages. It was just kind of like, I really don't like it when they do that to authors' work. So I said, I really want the paperbacks. Unfortunately, they add some of them in that Burroughs bunch. So we'll be reading some James Bond in the coming months. The other character I really want to focus on is Sherlock Holmes. This book that I have in my hand is actually one that my father bought when he was in England and actually at the real life 221B Baker Street. When my father was living in Europe in the late 1980s. And this book, he actually bought the whole collection. He has all of the Sherlock Holmes, the original Sherlock Holmes books, on these hardcovers. And he brought them all the way from England back here to America. So, I've read some of the Holmes books when I was younger, but I never really got too deep into them. And I really wanted to change that because, like I said, I'm a fan of The Shadow, and one of The Shadow's main inspirations was Sherlock Holmes. And actually, as I'll show later, Edgar Allan Poe had a character that was hugely influential on Holmes, too. So there's kind of a yin-yang thing going on here. So we'll be talking about Holmes throughout the year. The final character show that I want to do is Zorro. Because Zorro, the editor for the Shadowed Circle, Steve DiNozzo, was nice enough and sent me copies of all of the original Zorro stories, all the ones done by Johnston McCulley. And Zorro's this huge pulp character. Like, he is so influential in not just pulp fiction, but comic book fiction, and just a whole lot of different media. So I really wanted to read Zorro, especially since I have all the stories now. And I actually met the current Zorro publishers, Bold Venture Press, at Pulp Fest 2. So I just really want to read Zorro and see what all the buzz is about. Excuse me. So that's all the ones that I really have in mind. All the shows and series I have planned. Other kinds might pop up through the year. I may find a theme I really like and say, I should make a series focusing on that. Or I may discover a new genre that I really like and want to focus on. And in case, I think I mentioned this before, but I'm not going to be doing every single one of these every single month. These are a lot of different books and a lot of different focuses. And other events might happen in my life that take precedence. But these are ones that there'll at least be a couple of episodes throughout the year. I just kind of wanted to say them to give my idea and let everyone know what my plans were. And again, these are broad plans. These aren't going to be. I'm not doing one episode a month for every single one of these. So, yeah, that's my plans. I'm looking at the time now. It's an hour and 15 minutes, so I'm going to wrap it up now. Also, because my voice is going. But thank you very much for listening, to anyone who stuck around to listen to all this. And I'll have my videos about the events I'm going to be doing in January up in a day or two. And yeah. So thank you very much for listening, and I hope that we all have some fun on BookTube in 2026. Thanks. Bye.